Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said that the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain, and there must be fundamental change in how the country protects its children. I think we've heard that one before. Keir Starmer addressed the nation this morning, saying the UK faces a new terrorism threat following the guilty plea of Axel Rudder-Cabana, and also denied claims of a cover-up. Meanwhile, in the last hour, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, addressed the Commons, saying that action taken against Axel Rudder-Cabana was far too weak, adding the Southport attack was one of the most barbaric crimes, as she announced a public inquiry into this case. Well, let's now catch up with GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. A huge amount to digest here. So much has happened in such a short period of time. Let's start with this morning. So Keir Starmer addressed the nation, being blasted by Nigel Farage for a political cover-up, the biggest political cover-up, Nigel Farage said, of his entire career. In fact, he's given the new nickname, Cover-Up Keir. So Keir Starmer came out swinging this morning. Tell us how first the Prime Minister responded.
Well, there had always been, Martin, a real suspicion that the authorities were not revealing key facts regarding the background of Axel Rudder-Cabana. The Prime Minister himself, in Downing Street, in that news conference this morning, confirmed that, yes, that was true, that he knew very early on that ricin had been discovered in Rudder-Cabana's home address in Lancashire. Also that a PDF linked to Al-Qaeda documents had been found at his home address as well. He had also known about these referrals to the Prevent Counter Extremism programme. But he said the reason that the public were not told about this is because of the overriding need to ensure that the forthcoming trial was not prejudiced, that the public would not forgive him or indeed the authorities for revealing information that may result in the collapse of a trial. That was his justification, anyway, for not putting facts out there into the public domain. But the fact is, Martin, that they did reveal in late October, because I was up there in Liverpool at Merseyside Police Headquarters, that 2 new charges were being brought against Axel Rudder-Cabana at that time. Those charges relating to that PDF file linked to Al-Qaeda, a terrorism charge, and then a charge under the Biological Weapons Act relating to the ricin toxin that was discovered at his home address. Both the PDF and the toxin were discovered within a couple of days of the attacks taking place in Southport, and then a day or so later they were confirmed to be ricin and confirmed to have been a PDF linked to that Al-Qaeda study that again linked to the document. But we waited, Martin, for 3 months until the end of October before those charges were publicised and added to the indictment. We've heard as yet no satisfactory explanation as to why there was this very long time lag. Claims that it could potentially prejudice a trial seem weak at the very least, because if you're not prejudicing a trial at the end of October in giving these facts, why would the trial back in, say, July have been prejudiced by, again, giving those facts and revealing the 2 indictments that have been added to the charge against him? So a lot of questions that the wider public have about what they've been told right from the outset, a real feeling that they were not being told the whole truth. And that vacuum, of course, as we know, was fed by rumour and speculation on the internet that simply compounded the outrage and the anger that people in communities right across the country were feeling.
And then Mark White, Yvette Cooper addressed the Commons a short while ago. She seemed to address everything but the elephant in the room, if you ask me. Chris Philp, the shadow Home Secretary, then blasted back there could and should have been more openness and transparency to help prevent these riots. Will that be investigated? A key point, because there was a window of 3 days between the murders happening and Ruddock being charged. That could have been a time, Mark White, when information was released to try and put the flames out, rather than the silence many said later on actually was throwing petrol on that fire.
Even post-charge, Martin, most observers that are fully aware of the sort of criminal justice system and the way that these trials operate believe that there is information that could have been put into the public domain that would not in any way, shape or form really have had a realistic chance of prejudicing a trial. It has to be a significant threshold that is crossed before there is a contempt of court with regard to the proceedings that are about to take place. Judges always advise jurors to try that case on the facts put before them, not to go researching information for themselves and to disregard everything they may have heard about a case previously. And add to that the fact, Martin, that you have this vacuum with a lack of information being filled by internet rumours, adding to the anger and then the disorder that we saw in so many communities. There is then an imperative to try to come out with some kind of information that at least shows the public that, yes, there might well be more to this case, but they are not, the information is not being withheld from them.
OK, Mark White, an excellent summary as ever, and more questions remain than answers given today, I feel. Thank you very, very much. Superb as ever. Now, let's continue this conversation. I'm joined by the barrister and the writer, Stephen Barrett. Stephen, I love getting you on at moments like this because you give us an apolitical and legally clear summary of what's going on. Let's start with the obvious. Contempt of court. I know the law better than you, Sir Keir Starmer was basically saying. That's why I decided not to say anything. It may have given poor old Axel Ruddock an unfair trial. So why was information released in October that could have been released straight away? The Prime Minister today admitted he knew at the beginning it was a choice to keep it quiet. And the question's being asked, did that choice further add tensions which exacerbated these riots?
Well, we in the country have a massive problem because we have a Prime Minister and we can't trust a word he says. And we have a Prime Minister and we can't trust a word he says because he is now saying, oh, look, I may have lied to you, but I did it for your own good. You know, I did it for a good reason. It's complete tosh. And I love the way that non-lawyers are engaging with this. Please never let a lawyer sort of pat you on the head and say, I know the law, so you have to shut up. It's so patronising. It's deeply offensive. And I'm afraid he's just wrong. And every day he was wrong, Martin, I need to confess to your viewers and listeners, I knew he was wrong. And I could have picked a public fight over this by sending a tweet. And every day I would sort of lose my temper because I get very upset, Martin. I've seen pictures of what happens to those girls. So, and this is all going to come out and people are going to be very rightly upset. Anybody who cares about children is going to be crying, frankly, because it's horrific. But I've been very upset day after day after day. And every day to sort of stop myself picking this fight, because I knew if I did it, he'd say I derailed the trial. And I didn't even want the risk of that. You know, I didn't want a hysterical argument that I derailed the trial. So every day I just said to myself, Martin, the 20th of January will come. It's not that far away. The 20th of January will come. And I've been waiting for the 20th of January when yesterday he pleaded guilty. It's all over now. The idea that you can prejudice Mr. Justice Goose, who's going to be sentencing on Thursday, is a joke. So if anybody tries to say that anything between now and Thursday has prejudiced Mr. Justice Goose, tell them to go boil their head because he's an incredibly senior and well-respected judge. He's not going to be influenced by a tweet or a Facebook post. It's just ridiculous Stephen, to suggest that he will.
Can I ask you my second question then? And that is, a lot of people are saying that this surprise guilty plea may deny the cross-examination of this scumbag, this heinous murderer who deserves to rot in hell forever. Right, let's just get that clear. Will it deny us the information? Will the judge now be able to give us a version of events rather than the full events? Might information not reach the public? And might that further compromise public trust in the British judiciary?
Well, I don't want it to. So what I've been very clear about is that there is a huge distinction between a trial and an inquiry. And merely because an inquiry is going to happen, the contempt of court rules don't apply. They used to apply to inquiries, but we changed that in 2005. They don't apply. The same logic that nobody's going to prejudice Mr. Justice Goose will apply to whoever's running the inquiry, because whoever's running the inquiry will be a very senior lawyer who will not, again, be influenced by a tweet or a Facebook post. So we can grow up a little bit in dealing with the inquiry from now on. And I think the information is going to come out, because I've spoken to victims and survivors, and they want to talk. They're currently being traumatized, Martin. The police are going around telling them, no, you can't talk. And because they're decent people, and this is a point I like to make, we live in a broken society where only laws only apply to decent people. You know, that boy was stopped 10 times. And they never did anything. He was shifted to prevent 3 times. They didn't do anything. You know, but the good people who obey laws and who want to follow them are being silenced, and they must speak.
Stephen, you're absolutely right. I can't talk about all the stuff I know. Stuff might come out in time. I want to ask you another question. We're being given an inquiry, miraculously. Sir Keir Starmer whipped all his MPs to vote against an inquiry 2 weeks ago. It's the wrong kind of inquiry, perhaps. We don't want an inquiry into rape gangs. It might bring down the entire House of Cards. This inquiry, however, how politically robust, how politically neutral will it be? Who controls the inquiry? What questions will I ask? I put it to you, and call me a cynic, and I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong, Stephen Barrett. Could this inquiry be used to throw other organisations to the wolves? Oh, it's Prevent. It was the mental health services. It was the social services. Nothing to do with the fact the government wouldn't quash these rumours early on. Throw it onto other parties, and tickety-boo, lessons will be learned. Let's light a candle. This will all go away. Just like we heard after Nottingham with Valdo Calacani. Lessons won't be learned. We seem to be repeating the same old mistakes.
We are repeating the same old mistakes. We refuse to be governed well. It's heartbreaking to watch the United States suddenly be governed by somebody who actually knows what he's doing and what he wants to achieve, and for us to be floundering in this mess. I don't think that this inquiry will work as a cover-up. The real question, Martin, is going to be who caused those riots. And I think Keir Starmer caused that riot. If you've talked to survivors, then you know, I bet you will have picked it up on this. The one thing they always talk about is 19 seconds. That's what they say. So if you go to Southport, they talk about 19 seconds, because in their view, that's how long the Prime Minister took to lay down a wreath. And they don't say lay down a wreath. They often say throw down a wreath. And then he ran away being heckled by one of the and by somebody connected to the tragedy. And, you know, and that is just awful. Of course he fanned those flames. I said that all they cared about was managing it. And Starmer had one of his MPs publicly attack me on Twitter, and I had a nightmare time. It wasn't pleasant at all, Martin. I'll tell you about that. A month later in September, his own senior advisor on counter-terrorism told him that, you know, what he used a very diplomatic phrase, an information gap fanned the flames. You know, and that's what's happened. And it's because he wants to treat us like children, and he wants to be able to lie to us. Well, I don't want a Prime Minister who treats me like a child and who lies to me. I'm a serious grown-up individual, and I don't want children hurt, and I have every right to demand answers when children are hurt.
Stephen Barrett, wonderfully put. I think we're at a point now where people are starting to see through this. I think we saw that with the rape gang inquiry a couple of weeks ago. People have too much information, too much knowledge. It's shared too quickly, and that's what terrifies the heck out of them. And I just think we're going to see an inquiry that will ask perhaps the questions that they want to be asked, and perhaps it won't ask the questions that we want to be asked. And round we go. Stephen Barrett, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And I've also seen those pictures and heard those stories, and they are incredibly traumatising, and I think we're just getting started on what's truly going to come out of this case. The true horror of it is yet to emerge. Stephen Barrett, thank you for joining us today on GB News.